Here's a show I bet you forgot about. Does anybody remember Code Lyoko? Well, I do. It's interesting for a lot of different reasons. One, it's a French anime. It was about a group of kids who go into a supercomputer to stop a virus named Xana from taking over in the real world. It's a fun setup. It's also interesting because it uses both 2D and 3D animation simultaneously. The 2D is obviously when they're in the real world, and the 3D is when they're in the computer world. It may come off as a little silly by today's standards because this is from the early 2000s, and obviously technology has improved quite a bit since. But I still found it a fun show. I remember rewatching it a couple years later, and still, even though there were a lot of animation flaws, specifically when they're in Lyoko, the computer world, but the French anime aspect of it was so interesting. I liked the designs. I liked how different it looked from everything else out there. It's very recognizable, has its own thing going on there. I liked seeing something from another country. That was really cool to see, but it was also still interesting and well written enough, and the characters were unique enough. They had their own charm and personality to it, and the theme song was catchy as hell. I recommend listening to it in both French and English. I do like the French lyrics better. It's the same singer, by the way. But it's an earworm of a song, and I like it a lot. I liked how the characters felt like they got along, but they also got frustrated with each other. Honestly, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I remember thinking that the boarding school setting was really interesting. I remember thinking the designs were interesting. I remember liking all the different ways that they learned about this computer world. I liked learning about the different ways that the computer virus Xana took over in the real world. It was a really episodic show, but it's another one of these shows that had some continuity to it, which didn't really come into play until later. It was mostly a villain problem of the week. I mean, it's always Xana, but there was always kind of a different thing he'd be messing with. Sometimes he'd be messing with the kids' minds, and there were some really interesting episodes where there's body switching, and sometimes one of the characters would get stuck in Lyoko, or Xana would be messing with their mind. They had fascinating ideas. And you get to learn more and more about how this was created. The continuity did come later. I mean, don't expect something like Avatar: The Last Airbender or Gravity Falls that's meant to be continuous from the beginning. But it has these elements in there. It was really, really cool. And the world was really interesting. I thought it has some limitations to it, based on what technology was at the time. And there is some repeat animation. There are some continuity errors. But it still had a fun, engaging story, and it still has its own thing going on. Honestly, I liked some of their real-world problems, too. I kind of liked how Jeremy, the main kid who never really goes into the Lyoko, I liked how he was a bit of a nerd and outcast. I liked Odd. It's a bit of a prankster. I thought Yumi and Ulrich, who were, the two kids who had a crush on each other, I thought they were kind of cute. They had their own thing going on. And it was sweet. Generally, I tended to like stuff that was grounded in the reality. A lot of these shows, you'd have their problems in the real world, their day-to-day problems, but then you'd have the bigger problems with Lyoko and the action shows. A lot of shows I've noticed tended to do that. Totally Spies was similar with that. They'd have their day-to-day problems that would get solved at the end, but then they'd have their action problems. Kim Possible's another one that was like that. But interestingly enough, I tended to like the slice of life stuff more, and how that played into the action, how that played into Lyoko. So I'm curious as to if this show is remembered, because I think it's one that tends to go under the radar. I think maybe because, at least in the States, I think because it is, a lot of foreign shows don't really come across here. It's kind of rare for that to happen. But I think there's more of an interest, especially now. But it went under the radar. I don't know if it was just the animation style, or the fact that it was this collaboration from all over the world, but I am glad we're seeing more. We are seeing more foreign stuff. I hope people remember this one because it was interesting. It had good ideas. It had a fun setup. It was likable. If anything, check out that theme song. It's really catchy.